with the engine ready to go in, just got the torque converter pressed far in on the transmission as possible. I've got the engine mounts in on their correct side. It's left hand side of the car, right hand side of the car with an arrow pointing forward. I've got a jack under the transmission just to keep the front of it up, otherwise it droops too low with the weight of the torque converter in the front. And I'll hopefully try and slide the engine in. Just going to rotate this AC compressor up so that these lines are out of the way, of course, and we'll go from there. Yeah, so a couple of things. Number one, I ended up taking out the mounts and the brackets to go onto the block the same way that I took it out, just because that ended up being easier. My logic is you put the engine onto the transmission, so you're just worrying about lining that up. Then you can lift the engine up with this hoist, just a little bit, not too much. While it's connected to the transmission, it will lift the transmission up slightly, enough that you've got enough space to then simply slip in an engine mount and bolt on this, which is not overly difficult to reach with a little deep reach socket for there and the other side. So there's no mounts in, nothing at the moment. You get it mounted to the transmission, which I'll show you how I did that. They can be quite tricky. What it tends to do is you've obviously got to get the engine's angle relative to the transmission right. So having a jack there, I would just jack up and then you go to that side, jack up, get it to be lined up. It's lower than you think it would be on the mounts. And then if the rotation isn't right, it's obviously a very heavy engine, so the rotation of it, you can be at the right angle, but the dowel pin is a dowel pin on top of this bolt over here. Won't, like, one will be lining up, but then the flywheel won't be going in, sort of thing. But it's not to say that the engine is too low, it's that it needs to rotate and then that flywheel will come up and seat into the bell housing. So what I did is you get some screwdrivers, which then you can hold it in that position with the screwdriver and then push the screwdriver through, and the screwdriver will hold it there, and it's obviously got nothing on it, so it can rotate around that. And then I did it on the other side. So I did this one hole, and then I did that one over there. You can see there's another screwdriver going through there. So you can use those, you know, there's many different bolts. So you get the screwdrivers in and you leverage it to get it to where you want. Don't force it too hard, of course, but it works perfectly fine. Then you put in some of the bolts that you can reach with a decent amount of thread. Get some thread in, then wiggle the screwdrivers, get the next bolts in, and slowly, you know, you don't do them all at once, or one bolt all at once. You do one a little bit, get the other one, little bit, leaving your screwdrivers in just in case anything slips. Always mind your fingers, everything like that. Slowly wind them in, and then I'm just gonna take these screwdrivers out because these are now fully seated, basically. I'm gonna get these screwdrivers out, put the bolts that go in those holes into there. Then there'll be ones at the top that I can go do, but because it's right round the bottom and all the way up the sides, I'm sure that that will be, well, I can see that it is seated on that gasket. And then I'll tighten up the two from inside the cabin through the transmission tunnel hole over there. So that's how I did that. It was pretty difficult, but just a little wiggle around. Take it easy. Don't try and force, you know, 300 kilo engine with your arms. You'll just tire yourself out. Use your tools, use the jack and the hoist, get the angles right, and then the screwdrivers were a massive help just to leverage it and get it that last little bit to be able to start the threads on the bolts and start, you know, pulling it together. Okay, so now with the engine in and bolted onto the transmission entirely by the bell housing, all of the bolts, including the two that you do from inside the cabin, those are all tightened up and torqued down. Only thing I haven't done is the torque converters bolts, which we'll do on the other side after I've mounted the engine. Next up, I'm going to be adding the engine mount brackets that go on there by the 4 bolts, and then trying to put the engine mounts in. So with it bolted to the transmission, now I've lifted it up with the transmission. You can't go too high, it'll be limited by the transmission tunnel. But also just watch out for the ECU wiring there. You obviously don't want to mess with that, but it just clears it. But just look out, make sure you're not pinching, breaking any wires, anything like that. So underneath the car, putting on the engine mounts, I find it's easiest to slip the mount itself down and into the chassis holes. Then you put the nuts on from the bottom just a little bit, just to keep it from falling out if you jiggle it or anything. Then you slip in from the top the bracket that goes onto the block, and then you'll tighten that just through here. It's 4 bolts, bit of a wiggle. You can just do it with a spanner. Tighten those up, and then you'll have your top and bottom ones lined up, and then you'll just lower the block slightly to be able to put on the nut. And it's the same process on the other side mount, keeping in mind that just some of them have a bit of a shoulder on where it goes in. So this one's actually quite nice. It has 2 on the outside, but one of the nuts is actually under this sort of lip over there. You might not see it on the video, but you can access it all really easily just with the spanner from the bottom. Is probably the easiest way to do it, rather than trying to fit in sockets and things like that with a ratchet. But just got that in there. Mount down, bracket to the block on from the top, and then bolt it on sideways. Nuts at the bottom, nut at the top, and everything tightened up. Okay, got the engine in and on its mount. There's the one with the nut on the top and bolted to the block. And then there's the other one on this side, just over there, and bolted to the block. Those were the 2 easy ones I was talking about earlier. So now, what's left to do is the starter motor that goes in there, bolts on by those 2, fairly self-explanatory. There is the one sensor that's up and to the right of it. I'll have a video from earlier, but essentially that oil pressure sensor with the blue cable that connects to that one. And then now you can loosen up this bracket and the other one on the other side, just over there. This is all done, and the engine is in place, and everything else will be attached to it. So with the hoist out the way, next up is going to be spinning the crank to turn the flex plate so that that hole can line up, and I can put in the bolts that bolts the torque converter to the flex plate. I'll do that from lying underneath the car. It's much easier to access that. So from spinning the crank over, none of the holes for the moment at this top hole line up for the torque converter, because the torque converter will be staying still while the flex plate rotates. But that's where you'll default to the other hole that's at the bottom that does in fact line up just up in there, and then you can bolt that on, and then once you've got one in, it will be rotating with the flex plate, and you can do it wherever you'd like, at the bottom or at the top.
Party to the sun, see you vibing with me, I just wanna see what's up. We just started dancing and I think I fell in love. We won't get this moment back, so please lift up my cup. Do you wanna see the sun and have some fun? Do you wanna see the sun and have some fun? Do you really wanna see the sun? I see you vibing with me, so what's up? We just started dancing, fell in love, but we don't have to do it if you don't want. Do you really wanna see the sun?
So all I've done is put on the starter motor, which has its one bolt there. The top one goes on with a bracket that holds this wiring harness there. The bottom one is just its bolt by itself. Then you've got this wire that comes up here. Mine's the blue one. That goes to the oil pressure sensor. You've got that other one over there, just there. It'll go onto the starter motor. You've got this one that goes onto the throttle body later on. And then you've got this orange one that obviously goes onto the starter motor with a nut over there, onto the positive. And then this wiring sits here. There's a clip just there that clips onto that little metal bracket on the engine mount. And then there's 2 bolts that'll hold this bit of the wiring onto the engine mount over there. So you've got 1 plug, 2 plug that goes onto the starter motor over there, 3 plug on the starter motor, 4th plug on the throttle body, wiring harness clip just there, and wiring harness bolts just there. Starter motor on this side, and I think that's about it for this side. So that's all I'm doing when I'm working in on that side. Okay, so on this side of the engine, you've got your 2 bolts holding in the wiring harness here. You've got your plug onto the starter motor, the positive terminal there. You've got this one little clip that goes on that I've just highlighted white, goes on the side there. You've got one cable that runs down to the starter motor, also highlighted white, and the one blue cable or highlighted white that goes onto that oil pressure sensor. That's just up underneath there. And you will have this other plug that comes onto the throttle body, which is the thing that goes in next. Just that plug there will be going onto the throttle body. A little rubber flap that covers that hole as well to put the bolts into the torque converter. I've just painted orange so it's nice and easy to identify next time. It doesn't blend in all black and you barely even notice that it's there. Done the same thing on that bracket, nice and orange, so it should be easy to identify, stand out a bit more instead of being coated with oil or blending in because it's silver, making it look like it's all part of one assembly. This is just to show where the bottom bolt for the starter motor is, and that little colored piece there, and that piece there that accesses the bolts going into the torque converter. Okay, so after the throttle body is this wiring harness, which is held on by a bolt there and a bolt over there. Before you put these ones in, make sure you run this other cable that runs down to the crank sensor. Also goes underneath this pipe that runs along there. Then you've got 1, 2, and then you've got 1 and 2 holding on this other bracket. Another bracket over this wire, just keeping it away from the belt. That one there and that one there, and then connecting to the crank sensor. So that's all held nice and close. Then follow everything around. You've got your connection to your fuel pump, EGR, these 3 at the top, we'll get to those. Then you run around, and then fairly self-explanatory, you'll get your alternator and your AC compressor connections, and should be fairly simple. Next to go on this side of the engine is the coolant pipe that goes into that hose there and onto that with a new gasket. Then it runs along here, we'll connect to that one, and some other hoses that come along here. These pipes on there, 1, 2 clamp, there, and that one. After that, I put the dipstick in, so he just runs down. There's one support bracket, just over there. And then there's, of course, this one over here with 2 bolts over there. And he just seats in with an O-ring, so make sure you feel it seat nicely. And then you have your dipstick coming up, pointing forward like that. Before we go any further, I also just got a nice new leak-off line because the old one was looking a bit tired and frayed. It's a bit scuffed in some areas. You know, it's getting old as well. So, nice new one. It's got some metal hardware, which is great. So, I'll just pop that one in on the injectors first. After that, I just put in the power steering reservoir and its lines. So the one going to the pressure side, this one that's just a loop, it just goes around and then connects to here. Just running that side of this bracket, and then this one return line back into the reservoir. I might take that back off when I'm doing intake pipes connecting to there with the new ones, which is not overly difficult. It's just 2 mounting screws under there, and then this whole thing should be able to flop around, move this way, and flex that hose totally fine. Pull it this way, and then I'll be able to play around with the new intake pipe that's going to come through that hole there and run through. straight into that throttle body. Okay, AC compressor on with that long bolt there, and this one from the sides, plus the two at the bottom, of course. Then there's the plug on top of it, which slips onto a little bracket. Part of that same wiring runs to this plug over there next to the oil filter location. You can put this one hose on if you want to. It might get in your way when you're doing the filter, but just keep in mind, this one's fairly obvious. It just lines up with that pipe there. Not chucking these other pipes on yet, just because you need to access the dump pipe from up here. Those will be in the way when you want to tighten up those, so don't get to that just yet. There's also going to be a coolant hose that runs from here to the reservoir. So almost there. Then of course, this last bit of wiring that comes out of here, you'll just lay it across, and it's fairly self-explanatory really. Pop into there, there, follow it around. That'll connect to your injectors. In the last little bits and bobs, these three over here, you can only go one way. That'll also come from that harness. You can also flex this AC line just carefully, because you need him to obviously be clear of this filter housing, but it just connects down there. So don't flex it too much, be careful, you don't want to crack it, anything like that. But it does flex relatively easily actually, and then just mount him up nicely. So he's not touching, not rattling, nothing like that. Put the oil filter in next so that it's not needing to be got to once all the other intake piping is in. So you've got your oil filter housing with the O-ring that comes new with the filter. Then don't forget this piece that just locates it in there and seals the bottom so that the oil has to flow through the filament, of course. So that will go in there, and the filter can go in. And then, of course, the other side will be going onto its receptacle in the engine. This is what it will look like, so make sure every time you get a new filter, you take this out and put it in your new filter and don't accidentally throw it away, because that can be the reason for the discrepancy of why some Nissans last 300,000 Ks and some last 600,000 Ks. If you don't have that in, then it won't be doing any filtering. With the oil filter housing with the new O-ring, a bit of rubber grease on it, a little bit of rubber grease on that lip as well so that it slides in nicely. This piece in the back, then I can slip this in first so that it locates it nice and centrally. Then you can just put your cover housing over it. Okay, I've just laid this one wiring harness over the top, and that wraps around and then will connect to the injectors. It's got clips here, here, there, 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 and there. And then it's fairly self-explanatory. It's got these three on the left over here, and then this one which will connect up to a map sensor on the left. There's a temperature sensor over here. There's one for the turbo boost controller over here, and then one for the MAF sensor on the right, which will all be connected up later. So it's fairly self-explanatory to just follow it around. For example, all of these ones over here will of course just connect up to the injectors, and then there's just two over here, which I'll show in a second, that's a bit further back in the engine bay. So those two were just going over here. They just clip onto this one little black bracket over here, and then one of them connects up to the swirl flap actuator, and one of them connects up to the end of the fuel rail. And that's that whole wiring harness. Now, before things start to get in the way like the alternator, I'm going to put in some of the new intercooler piping now. So after I've put in the new pinch welding over here on the holes that I drilled in a previous episode, you can see that on both sides. So you can see how this one leads through and will come through into this wheel arch over here. And then I've also just radiused this one bit in the same sort of axis as that little hole over there, just sort of 2-3 centimeters back from where it originally is, give it a little bit of paint, and then put the pinch weld over it. So after that, that intake pipe's going to come down and go through this wheel arch, and there is plenty of space over here, even when the wheel turns, and there's suspension articulation. This is what the pipes will look like, so I'll just get them in and then you can see where they'll line up. It's much easier to see it that way. I've also just put back in the power steering cooler lines. I don't think they needed to come out, but I took it out to flatten out this one bracket over here, and also to give me a bit more room when cutting these brackets to mount the front mount intercooler. So now we can put that intercooler in and connect it up to these pipes over here. I also need to just connect up these two new lines over here to the power steering cooler because those were super hard when I needed to take it off, so they needed to be cut. The new piping is in and it was a bit finicky. You just have to twist them and turn them until you manage to get them to fit in. And you can see how this one is running up and into the intake throttle body over there. You just have to watch this one pipe and make sure you leave enough clearance for this spinning steering rack over here. So I did that just by connecting it up with some cable ties to this power steering reservoir over here. And I'm also just going to add some cable ties when I put the new mount bracket in, just so that it's held up by that power steering reservoir over there. You can then see where it comes out of the turbo, runs down to a connection over here, and then runs through that wheel arch. You can see it just through the wheel arch over there. Then it comes around to the front, where it'll connect up to the front mount intercooler over here. That was just a bit finicky to film with me in the way, and it's hard to see where the pipes go, but you just connect them up. It's fairly self-explanatory, can't really go wrong. Then just make sure before you close up and put the fuel filter in, you tighten these things up nice and tight so you don't have any leaks under boost. Next up is the fuel filter, which fits in just like this basically. It just slips into its little housing, which you tighten up over here. It's got the fuel supply coming up to this little pressure bulb over here and then goes into the filter. It's got the one coming up that goes into this spigot over here with the clip that gets held in. And that one goes to the middle connection over here. And then the one on the right just runs over here into sort of the middle of the filter. And then there's one plug which goes to a water sensor on the bottom, which aftermarket filters don't come with the sensor, but genuine ones do. I'll put it up on the screen. So make sure you don't throw out your sensor like I did, because I thought it was a disposable. I thought it would come with a new one, but only the genuine ones do. I'm sure that the workshops have a bunch of them laying around, so really they could just be giving them out from every single filter that they change, and they don't sell them by themselves. They only sell them with a filter. So I think they should have some sort of second-hand sales for those little sensors, to be honest. To check you don't have any leaks, basically, you can pressurize the system at any time by just squeezing this bulb and making sure it all holds. Next to go in is going to be the dump pipe over here on these three studs. The reason there's three now, and there was just one when I assembled it on the engine stand, is two of them just came out instead of the nut coming off. So I've just put those back in now with their gasket, and that'll be ready for the dump pipe to go on. It's easiest to go on from the bottom. So from the bottom, you can see the dump pipe is on now with a support bracket over here, then running down and connecting onto the rest of your exhaust flange over here. And you can even line it up onto the studs and push it on from down here. And it's easiest to get it on from the bottom because it's a smaller curve as opposed to this big long one over here, trying to get that down from the top. So with the dump pipe all in and tightened up, that's all done. And the next thing to go on is going to be these hoses. So with those on, that's all done. Next to go on is going to be the coolant reservoirs over here. So there, with these all in, this little pipe that runs down and just has a support bracket over here, that one just runs up and connects up to these coolant pipes over here. Don't forget the transmission lines, which are just mounted there, there, one up there, and then into the transmission, around the bottom to the other side, into the transmission there. The transmission lines, it's this little zigzag one that goes on the right side, and this one that connects there, runs up to here, just that one. So this pipe is just contacting my radiator a little bit there, because this is a aftermarket radiator that's a bit bigger and welded with this electric fans on the front. So just the fans bracket is contacting it there, so I'm probably going to take that out, trim it a little bit. Okay, got the intercooler in and mounted. Got the two hoses on there, running through. Comes up, goes up to there, goes through, goes to there. I cut out a little groove in just the cover for it, and there is clearance there. And then just here, I've just got a piece of rubber just in case it rubs. Just got a cable tie holding it steady, and then I've also got this mounted up just one notch higher, and then with the map sensor that's going to be mounted on that, that will then run down to the fittings on here, and I might blank off two of them that just aren't used for anything at the moment. Next to go in is going to be the alternator, which my one had a faulty bearing on it. So I've got an entirely new alternator that's going to go in there. Radiator's in with its piping going there. and this pipe over here, and the two transmission lines, one going to there, one going running up, connecting up to these pipes up in here, but then run around and go to the automatic transmission cooler as well. So that's all done. I also replaced those lines on the power steering cooler, which also just runs there, and there's plenty of clearance. Super nice after I've got just that one bracket flattened out with a new bolt in there. So that's looking good. So there we go, new intercooler in. New alternator in by 1, 2, and third bolt is just in there. Then it's got plug, positive terminal just under there, and then a negative or ground onto the body, just onto this little bolt here that I just took from the old alternator because it's a 4mm, not a very common size bolt. Nice new alternator on. When it's ready, belts can now go on. The shifter assembly, there's this cover piece, which is a top piece that slides over this back plastic on the 4 corners. Then you've got an internal sliding piece and this one glass piece on the side. This is just plastic that's part of this back plastic. So the light will just slide in the back there, which is this thing with a little yellow cover on it. So I guess you can change the lights. You can take this shifter off if you want to clean it or reupholster it or something. You have to press this button in, lift it up, then that button will come out, then you can pull this up. To take it off, you do need to take out 2 pins that go in the side here. So you've got to take that yellow clip out of this to be able to take the pins out. I'm putting that back in now. Then when you press this button, that's what pushes down that thing. When this stays still, you push that and it will send a pin down that lets you engage the different gears and whatnot by moving it back and forth. That'll move the shift arm and actuate the transmission, select your gears and whatnot. Yeah, putting that all back together now. This will slip over the top and then that gear stick will come on top of this. And then this will just bolt with these 4 screws onto the sides of it. There's mounting places for it there, and there. This piece goes in with its 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I slipped it on sideways, then straightened it like this. Next will be the shifter. That'll go in just like that. This piece will swivel around just like that and fit into this hole over there, where it will then actuate on this thing. Then it will be bolted down by 1, 2, 3, 4. This side bit was actually quite difficult to get in. It's just a little bit finicky, but he'll go on that side of that little plastic piece. I actually just unbolted this so it can lift up, and you've just got to play around and play with this. Pull this piece up, which will rotate that to the point where you can slip it in that gap, and then you'll get it in and you can press it in there to put it in the position that it was in and make sure that it's all functioning properly. Then I'll just screw this back on and bolt it on. There's just one plug, plugs in over there. Then you can go down to the bottom and connect up the shifter. Real simple. Just slide it through and put the little pin through. Give it a little bend so it doesn't come out. Next to go in is this bit with these kind of screws, which is going to go in 1, 2, and 3 and 4 sideways there. So I've got this back piece out so you can access those points to screw this bit in at 4 points. And then you'll have this bit in at 4 points through the sides over here and at the top over there. And then this piece will be in. You're going to have to slide it all the way forward into park to be able to fit this bit over this handbrake, put this rubber piece on before you put this. So once you've got this center piece in, screwed in 1, 2, and then on the sides 3 and 4 in there, then this piece will slide in from the back, and it has these pieces on the sides. So make sure you guide these and get them into where they're meant to go. And then it has these at the top, and that will go in on the sides here and allow you to bolt that piece in, 2 on the sides and 2 at the top. And this little piece just goes in bottom first, press the top down, and he's in. Then next up will be this piece, which will go in. It has 2 clips that will clip in there and there. And then it has also some other bits. So when you put this in, you can put it in sort of over this gear stick and then at an angle, obviously seated over this low selector and whatnot. And then it will bolt in on the sides here and over here. And then there's the one plug that will go underneath and connect up to this one little light that's in the ashtray or something. So that'll be in next. Is this centerpiece, which you push this silver bit into, and it just clips in the 4 corners. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Then you'll put in these gauges from the back, or little switches rather, just into there. Don't forget to plug them in, and then you slip it in. Be careful, because just this centerpiece is only held in by a few things. I've super glued mine, but when you slip it over, you just got to slip it carefully over the gear stick, slide it into place, screw it in 1, 2, and 3 in the middle. And also don't forget about this one little light. Once you've got that one in, the ashtray just slots in. It can just push up and down. Just pop him in and screw on the gear lever. Pop your front seats in. There'll be dowel pins that line them up. And then you've just got your bolts in the corners over there. And obviously at the back, it's just these big ones. All of the doors are fairly much the same. 1, 2, 3 screws. And then 1 in the handle from the top down into there. And you'll put in the switches first with their plug, and then this back piece. So in reverse order, you just pull up on the back piece, it'll pop up. This back piece will come out, then you can undo the screw, take the handle out, undo the switch. These 3 screws, the rest is clips around the door and a thing around the handle. Just put the map sensor in, blanked off 2 of the plugs that I don't need for any boot gauges or anything. Run a little pipe to it. Intake air filter box is obviously just this piece, which has 3 bolts on the bottom that stick through, and you put the nuts on from underneath. So you've got them 2 over there, and then there's 1 over there that holds in this piece. Then you've got this piece, which has 1 clip on the top side. The other 3 come from the bottom, 1, 2, and 3. Then you have this running. I took out the resonator box because it will contact this, so no resonator box anymore. Then you'll have your pipe that comes from here, runs to your intake, and you'll have your 2 plugs. This one will be going to your MAF sensor, and this other one will be going to your vacuum control solenoid that will take vacuum from here to the solenoid and to there. And then it has a 3rd plug, which is just a vent and breather to clean air. So those 2 will connect up onto this new pipe, and that's going in next. For the battery tray, it's got 1, 2, 3 bolts, and then 2 on a support bracket over there. And then this little nice rubber mat just to isolate the vibrations, and then the battery will go in there. That was with 8.5 litres.
I've just attached the suction side of the intake to the turbo here. Even the stock one is a pretty smooth and straight path for air right into the turbo. Then I've just attached the vacuum control solenoid with some trusty cable ties over here, because it would usually mount on the resonator box that is now removed, and it has to be close to the intake so its plug will reach. I've then capped off the place where the resonator box used to attach using a nice piece of plastic that was just the perfect size to plug this hole and has a bit of a funnel shaped shoulder so it can't ever be sucked further in. So the air will be sucked through the filter and straight into the turbo. The air filter can go in, and next we move on to the front grille.
The grille, had to trim off some of the back of it here and just take out this middle piece. Trimmed it up with a flat disc just because it needs to clear the corners here towards the top side. Obviously further down you go, the more clearance you have. And then it will just clip on in these corners here and by these 2 over here. it will bolt on, and then you'll have the grill on.
After slowly fitting the bull bar into place and checking where it would contact the intake pipes, I just marked up where I thought I would need to trim just so I get the clearance I need. I ended up doing it in 3 stages where I needed to trim back a little bit further than I thought each time.
Okay, ended up cutting out a first bit and then going further back and then further back still, but at least it still has, you know, a 3-axis support there and this additional support bracket that comes in from the side. So shouldn't really compromise anything. Still a hell of a thick heel. Going up, supporting most of it. This is just the one that sits there. So you still got 3 up along there on both sides with support brackets. Now I'm just going to give it a lick of paint. That's why it's outside. I also just had to hammer here down because it had like a shape up. So I just hammered it down so that it clears the intake pipes, and I'll just paint some clearance. Then putting in the sway bar with the drop links, which will just be held on by those nuts. So that's going in next. After getting the bull bar on, just popping the battery in with its bracket on the top, connects to the side there, and then it's got its own cables that come to there. I'll wire that in a minute once I've got the other battery in and it's all ready to go. I've also put in the fluid, so power steering fluid, brake-in oil for this first bit, and then I'm just about to top up the transmission with transmission fluid, fill the radiator, and then go from there.
Okay, you want to bleed the fuel system
Okay.
at the same time, you know?
Yeah.
Let me just go here to live data quickly, and I can also see if the oil pressure is about to climb, you know?
Yeah.
You see oil pressure sensor is reading 0 volts. Now I wonder what it's meant to read. Well, probably 0 when it's stationary, eh? Okay, can I crank?
Yeah, I'll just be watching.
If anything goes wrong, just say switch off. You turn this motor over once you had assembled it on the...
Well, I turned it over a couple of times to put the transmission torque converter bolts in, so yes.
Okay, are you happy for me to crank?
Sure. Anything on the oil? Did the voltage for that thing change at all?
No, I'm just checking. Okay, you ready?
Yeah.
We ended up just putting some jumper cables onto it because we knew we'd be cranking for a while to try and get this oil pressure up. So that's why there's a little bit of additional noise. We've just got a car off to the side here, off the screen, that's busy idling and supplying some of the power to the battery on the left.
Okay, now it started. So the fuel system is next. Now you must take lights off.
Have you got oil pressure yet?
I didn't look, I didn't even want to look, I just shut down.
So it sounds alright.
Sounds good. We're just going to get oil pressure.
The oil pressure sensor just wouldn't read properly. With our scan tool, we could see that it just wasn't getting any voltage even when we were cranking. That's why, despite the first time when it wanted to start, we didn't want to connect the injectors yet and actually let it run without knowing that it does in fact have oil pressure.
It just can't inject now, it won't pulse.
But let me just give it a crank for 15 seconds, then you'll stop, then I'll check codes. Does nothing.
We did eventually decide that it must just be the oil pressure sensor that must be faulty because we weren't expecting any other issues that could be causing low oil pressure. So we decided to replace it.
Oil pressure sensor was broken and not working. This black plastic part rotates relative to the housing. Not meant to happen. There's a new one. Instead of trying to reach in and grab it deep inside there, it's much easier just to reach in from underneath the car, and you can reach right up in past the starter motor and you can handle it really easily. You can get a spanner onto the side of it and tighten it in. From underneath the car, you can just reach up straight through here and get access to that hole from here.
And with the new one in, we cranked some more. After cranking for a while, and despite having a new oil pressure sensor, we just weren't getting oil pressure. It was really concerning, and at this point I was feeling a bit down.
The plug seems fine. Maybe the wiring's a bit fucked, I don't know.
The oil pressure just wasn't coming up, and I knew I had done everything right.
I can see the whole wire. Everything looks fine.
But then we decided to investigate a bit closer, and upon checking the new oil pressure sensor, I did realize some of the wiring on top of the oil pressure sensor did look a little bit frayed.
Need be, I can snip the whole wire and replace the wire.
Eventually, we did discover the wiring had been tampered with by a previous owner. So there we found our brake. So we decided to cut it out and redo all of this nice and fresh and done right. They potentially just changed oil pressure sensor plugs in the past, and then this time we're just sticking with the same design of oil pressure sensor because it should still work, but we're just fixing up all the wiring. So we soldered on 3 new pieces, put on heat shrink nice and neatly so that the plug was nice and secure and not going anywhere, and then we crimped it on to the rest of the wiring harness at the end. We also heat shrinked right over that, and then put some protective coating over all of the wires, just like the rest of the wiring harness. So looking like factory. Finally, we had voltage.
Much better. Okay, all good.
Well, it moved from 0.5 to 1.5 volts.
Now I was feeling a lot better knowing that there's oil pressure, so we decided it was okay to start.
Okay, so it's starting to come. I actually should have looked if the engine light had gone off. The light's off on the dash and there's pressure. There's 1.5 volts there. Output injectors. This is going to be the moment of truth.
And then if it starts,
We'll just let it idle 3-4 minutes. We shut down. You check all your levels again, fluids and that, because then it's that time now to swirl through. You can maybe cycle the transmission through reverse, neutral, drive and back, and then we check levels.
well, injectors are in. Let's see if she'll go.
You ready?
Yeah.
Finally, the moment we've all been waiting for.
Key on, 5 seconds, then start.
I think I need a pen. Don't care how long it takes you.
And with that, the last thing to go on is the bonnet with its gas struts and just the one little line for the windscreen washer jets. The last thing to do was take it for a drive with the brake-in oil in and the car loaded up with family and friends to help put the car under load and bed in the piston rings nicely. If you enjoyed it, make sure to like and subscribe down below, and I'll see you on the next project.